I'm Judy Copeland, and I have been at Stockton for about 10 years. I'm old, so that means that I've had a lot of different incarnations already in my life. And so my current incarnation is college professor. And I teach mainly creative nonfiction.
What got you into writing?
Oh, interesting. I think I did like writing as a child. I liked writing really, really bad fiction, or terrible fiction. Then I became a lawyer, and I kind of forgot about that. And it wasn't really until middle age that I started writing again. And then I realized that I've probably always really been a creative nonfiction writer. I mean, even in college, I was writing creative nonfiction, but I didn't have a name for it, and I didn't know that was what I did. But I actually took one creative writing class in college, and thinking back on it, I think that almost everything I wrote in that class was creative nonfiction, but I just didn't know that was a genre.
So, how was your path to becoming like a professor at Stockton?
Oh, it was a very twisted path that began, originally when I was in college, I thought I was going to be a professor of religion and philosophy, and that was kind of because I didn't know anything else to do. I mean, my dad taught comparative religion, so by my senior year, I realized, I'm just, following my dad's footsteps because I don't know. Basically, I had a really religious upbringing, and so I thought that I would have to have some profession related to religion, but I did not want to convert people. So I thought, well, if I'm a professor, I don't have to persuade anybody of anything. I just say, well, over here there are people who believe this. Over there are people who believe this other thing. And I could just study what people believe. But after college, this is when the 60s revolution happened. It was a great time to be a college student. So by my senior year, the 60s revolution had hit the Southeast, which was where I was in college. And so after college, naturally the thing to do was hitchhike around America and discover America. So that's what I did. And I was actually planning to go to India, I actually married my boyfriend because we thought we had to be married in order to travel to room together in India. And then our travel agent stole our money. We never went on the trip. So here I was, a husband, and no trip, no job, no place to live, because I had already, moved out of all those things thinking I was going on the trip. So then we just ended up in Oregon, kind of at loose ends. And one thing led to another. I became a civil rights organizer. So I guess that was my, after thinking I was going to do comparative religion, that was my next incarnation. So I was doing women's rights organizing for about 10 years in Oregon, including going to law school and studying civil rights. And then once again, things twisted, and I ended up in Japan working in a Japanese law firm doing international business law. And after that, I just kind of went off the deep end and traveled for years and years. And when I came back to America, I wasn't really any good to be a lawyer anymore. I mean, my personality was so changed, I couldn't do it. And I started writing, and so that's how I came back to writing. I just started writing, and at first it was just a crap. It really was. It was no good, and I knew it. So I didn't have aspirations to actually write stories. I thought, well, I'm just going to do some kind of a little travel how-to book. But gradually, I took, I got in some workshops and people persuaded me, Judy, you're a storyteller, you really want to write stories, so just write them. And so that's what I've been doing ever since.
That's good. So, if any, what kind of poetry do you like?
Hard to say. I totally suck at poetry, so I'm not a poet. But I appreciate, I just appreciate the sound and the rhythm of language. I love listening to poetry, and as a child, I don't know why, I went on kind of a project where I was going to memorize as many poems as I could. And of course, I didn't pick very good ones. I mean, I memorized the ones that were in the textbooks I had as a kid in school. And back then, it was, they were good poems, but they were really old ones, like Walt Whitman, Robert Louis Stevenson, all those really old-fashioned poets. So Rudyard Kipling. I mean, I memorized at least 100 poems, just because I think I had some kind of fantasy that I think I had heard a story about a man who was imprisoned in China right after the Chinese Revolution, and he was put in a cell and with nothing to read or anything to do, and then he was executed. And for some reason, this man was kind of sanctified by the religious community I lived in Japan. So I thought, well, I wasn't so interested in his, religious achievements. I was interested in, well, that's really interesting. What if I were put in a prison and nothing to do? Now, what could I do? And I think the moral of the story had been, well, you need to memorize the Bible. And I thought, no, I think I'll memorize poetry. And so that's why I was memorizing them. I thought that one day I would be in a prison cell with nothing to do, and I needed to have poems to entertain myself with, because I didn't want to be stuck with nothing but the Bible.
So, can you express any feelings that you have towards poetry?
Feelings towards poetry. I think I appreciate. It's probably not. I'm sure it's not technically poetry, but I appreciate poetry in any kind of writing or spoken language, and when I write, I listen in my head to the way that the sentences sound, and if the rhythm doesn't sound good, then I will just keep rewriting the sentences. So I'm not a poet, but I do care how sentences sound. And I also spent a lot of my life just reading and not really talking to people that much. So when you do that, you don't really know for sure how words are pronounced. You just make up the pronunciation. So it was very disappointing, as I went through life, to discover I was pronouncing words wrong. So I thought I had a really great sound going in a sentence I wrote, but of course it didn't really sound the way I thought it did.
So, how can poetry help different people in different professions?
Well, it's a very reflective art. Poetry steps back and looks at a moment with great intensity, and so I think it can almost help people sometimes transcend the circumstances of their life and realize that there's more than immediately evident in what's going on in their lives, and it's a way of finding beauty in whatever is going on in a person's life. I mean, what's going on might not be beautiful, but poetry helps you you know, you can write a poem about anything. You know, you can write a poem about a dung heap. You know, it's a way of finding beauty in whatever is there.
All right. Are there any last like thoughts that you have about poetry?
I think poets should be paid more.
Yeah.
They work really hard for each word.
All right. I think that's good. So.
Mhm.
Let me just go back real quick and